from last night. No, you don't have to sit through a 5-minute commercial. But yeah, greedy Fox News wants you to sit through a million commercials, as if Fox News doesn't already have enough money, particularly for what they give you. They give you garbage. I don't even know why we're playing their garbage. Why are we playing their garbage? In fact, you know what? I'm not gonna. You can just tell me about it. I'm not playing Fox News. They're a bunch of scum. Go ahead, guys. Welcome to the program. Glad you're with us. We're not playing scum anymore. Fox is banned. I don't think we should play their garbage.
We're not going to have much to choose from then.
Yeah, well, that's a great commentary on our network. We got to go to scum like Fox News to have clips.
Let's get them.
What's that? That's all.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's all.
That's all.
Yeah, the situation with when you're talking about the CPI, when they talk about it, they always leave out one little fact.
What's that?
Put into it what they want to use to make it look lower. Like if they don't want to throw food in, they don't put food in.
That's right.
If they don't put something else in, they don't. It's the same thing of jumbling the numbers. Again, I go back to the premise they haven't dealt with the 20% that it already went up, and actually it probably went up 50%, but they only take whatever they want to make it look good. So if this doesn't look good, they won't put it in there. I don't believe food is in there. Many of the other things that we use every day are not in the CPI. They go with whatever they choose to make it the way they're going to make it, to make themselves look good. And being that it is politically based, the Federal Reserve, they want to make it look good for the election for their dear friends, Kamala and, Sleepy Joe.
Yep, that's right. What about you, Mr. West? What do you think tonight?
Same thing as Michael. In the article or the video, it was...
You mean the video we're not going to play because we're sick of the scum at Fox?
Two economists, Thomas Honig and Stephanie Pomboy, have issued warnings about the Fed's focus on inflation data. Honig, former president of the Kansas City Federal Reserve, argues that inflation is still too high and advises caution in lowering rates. Pomboy, president of Macro Mavens, suggests that inflation may be misunderstated, shocker, citing the rising value of gold as an indicator of higher inflationary pressures. So, of course, inflation is much higher than what they're reporting. And in the video, they also talk a little bit about, the Fed trying to please the stock market also. Pomboy highlights gold's 30% increase since 2021, suggesting it reflects higher inflation expectations than the consumer price index indicates. So, yeah.
Okay.
Tomorrow's the big day. Is it going to be 0.25%? Is it going to be 0.5%? I had a video, I didn't share it tonight, but I had a video of Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, railing to somebody about how the Fed, Jerome Powell, doesn't know what he's doing and he's behind and that he needs to cut 0.75 tomorrow. That's what she wants.
Interesting. All right. Let's go to this one. People aren't seeing the real de-dollarization. It's not a black swan event yet. In fact, it's playing out right before our eyes and was entirely predictable. The world is slowly but surely spurning the dollar. Yeah, that's only something we've been talking about for how long? Oh, I don't know. I looked up the other night how long I've been talking about the BRICS banking system. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. I think it was, I'm going to go double check. I don't know when it was. It was a long time ago. Let me go look it up while you guys talk about that. Because you're right, this has been a long time in coming. It hasn't been like this is a secret.
We've been talking about the de-dollarization, which basically means the destruction of the U.S. dollar. We also talked about it with the SWIFT situation with China and the new SWIFT payment system they're doing with the BRICS. We're talking about that China doesn't want to destroy America. They don't want to take over. They want to make us like a Canada, where we are nothing more than a protectorate of the Chinese government. They literally want to destroy the U.S. dollar. That's why they're backing their currency with gold. That's why the BRICS are backing a good portion of the BRICS system with gold. That's why the rest of the India and China and Russia and Saudi Arabia and all the rest are gravitating to gold as an international means of monetary exchange, because they want to alleviate the dollar. Because if the dollar is gone or shredded, or we are no longer the world reserve currency, who wants it? We're going to pay usurious rates to get loans. The values will go down. We'll go into a pseudo hyperinflationary period. And people don't realize how fast that can happen. But this de-dollarization has been going on since Barack Obama was in office. Trump is the only guy who fought it when he was in office. And the best thing what Trump said recently about this week was that any country that does not do business in the U.S. dollars is not going to get our business. I think you couldn't be more direct than that. Because if not, if Kamala Harris wins, ladies and gentlemen, my prediction, by March of this next year, we will no longer be the world reserve currency. It'll end fast, real quick.
And here we go. The show where we talked about BRICS for the first time that I'm aware of is May 4th, 2015. May 4th, 2015. So that'll be 10 years this coming May. So when that guy's article says, hey, look, this was highly predictable, you could see this coming, he's absolutely right. We've been talking about it almost 10 years. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And we were talking about how they want to have an economic war and dethrone the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. So we've seen it coming. And can you imagine what was the price in precious metals 10 years ago? You guys know? Does anyone got one of your handy little charts, or you want me to look it up?
Yeah, we can look it up real quick.
Price of gold in May of 2015. Let's see what it was. Price of gold in May of 2015.
Under 1,000.
It was 1,000. Let's see, is that right? Was it $1,178.50?
Hold on.
Much lower than it is today, that's for sure.
What's that? Yeah, it's lower than it was today. Yeah, there it is. Look at this. Look at this. Here we go. I got a chart here. Here we go. In May of 2015, $1,178. And what is it today?
Today it is
2,570. So almost 2,600.
74.30.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
I have $2,574.03 on our clicker. So basically, 25.75. 25.75. So you would have more than doubled your money.
Yep.
Yep.
So 10 years ago, less than 10 years ago, or almost 10 years ago, we're telling you they're going to replace the world reserve currency. BRICS is going to, all these big nations are going to whoop up on us. Here's what you should do. And I guess people just decided they would rather watch their dollars deflate, and they did nothing, a lot of people.
Who was the president 10 years ago?
That would have been Barack Hussein Obama.
Yeah, what, Barry, you mean? Barry,
Yeah.
his name's
Barry Sorrento. Barry Sorrento.
Yeah, Barry.
All right, here we go. Let's see. Mr. Wes, you wanted me to pull up this here. Yield curve, what it is and why it matters. The yield curve is in a line graph showing interest rates of bonds of similar credit with different maturity rates. It can be an important economic indicator. What do you want to tell us about this?
Right. Well, we've talked about this a little bit, but this is a huge, the yield curve when the 10-year Treasury pays a lower return than the 2-year. So you can get a higher rate of return on the shorter term investment. When that unwinds and goes back to normal, that is a huge recession indicator. And so people need to be very, very concerned about that because it's been correct every single time going back to 1955.
So here we are, 1965 to 67.
Yeah, it shows each year that the yield curve was inverted and how long it was inverted. And we just came out of the inversion this month. And it's by far the longest inversion we've had. It was 783 days was this last yield curve inversion. The second longest period was from 1978 to 1980, and that lasted for 22 months.
Actually, 25 months.
Yeah, 25 months. So we had inversions from August 1966 to May of 67, so that was for 9 months. The next inversion was from June 1973 to May of 1974, 11 months. And after every one of these years, there was a recession. August of 1978 to 1980, a 25-month inversion. December 1988 to April of 1989, 4 months inversion, recession followed. February 2000 to December of 2000, 10 months. December 2005, June 2007, 18 months. And then August 2019 to October 2019, COVID. That one was only for 2 months. And then the inversion that we just came out of, which was for 783 days. And those are all examples of every time that the yield curve was inverted and we came out of it and the yield curve got back to normal, it led to a recession. Usually within anywhere from 4 months to a year, that recession kicks off.
Well, there you go. What do you want to say about that, Mr. Weiner?
Well, Wes is exactly right, and they've been talking about the yield curve. I'm a big fan of Stephanie Pomboy. She's really one of the people who's been nailing this consistently about the yield curve. And, you know, Thomas Honig, the guy is out of Kansas. He was with the Federal Reserve, has been very honest about it. And the only people who are not honest about it are our political people in the Federal Reserve. And the gal who's working for Biden right now, guess who that is? And his financial economic person that he uses, his economist, Brainerd. Guess where she used to work? The Federal Reserve. So this non-biased, non-political operation is totally political. And this yield curve issue, as Wes had pointed out, is dramatic. Why don't they do anything about it? Because if they did, they'd have to stop spending. They'd have to stop selling these Bidenomics ridiculousness. And they'd have to admit to the disaster that they've done in the economy. But instead, they are not doing it. They're going to let the problem happen. And they don't care because they're not the ones that suffer. We are. And people don't want to wake up to this and don't want to pay attention to this right now. They will be the same people like in 2008, 2009. I used to say I got a kick out of the suburban housewives driving around in the Escalades, spending $100 filling that tank, and they'll be driving around in a CRV Honda if they can afford to buy one, because they will lose their homes, period.
All right, let's go to why the yield curve matters. Watch and listen to this little video. Here we go.
People talk a lot about yield curves.
We have seen peak curve inversion.
The curve can steepen.
Did the curve get steeper? No.
It's a graph that shows interest rates on U.S. government debt that mature in a few years to many decades. So why are we talking about it now? Well, the curve has started to resume what has historically been its normal shape, upward sloping. That means investors want more yield to put their money in U.S. Treasuries for a decade compared to doing so for just a few years. What makes this so key is that in 2022, when the Fed began ratcheting up rates aggressively to rein in inflation, short-term yields jumped and surpassed those on long-term Treasuries. This so-called yield curve inversion has preceded almost every recession since 1955. So that caused concern of a looming U.S. downturn under the weight of Fed monetary policy tightening. And while that hasn't happened yet, many investors say the recession is likely coming. They remember that back when the Fed in the past started signaling or actually began cutting rates to support the economy, that caused short-term yields to fall back below longer-term ones in what's dubbed disinversion or curve normalization. The recession, they say, is typically not far off from that.
All right, well, there you go. How you guys like that?
Yeah, so it's very important that people pay attention to that. I mean, it has a very strong 100% track record. So my question would be, what would be different this time to prevent that recession from coming? I think it's on the horizon.
Yep, here's another one.
A clearer idea of how they work, we can imagine traffic on an interstate.
What's that?
That's where you stop it. You play from the start to that point.
From the start to that point. All right.
Yes,
Then
sir.
look at the bond market for clues on how the U.S. economy will perform, specifically the yield curve.
Given the yield curve inversion,
We inverted back in March.
Yes, we now have an inversion.
Even if the yield curve inversion happens again and happens persistently.
The president tweeting out crazy inverted yield curve.
So what is the yield curve all about, and why is everybody talking about it? The yield curve is just a graph showing the relationship between short-term and long-term interest rates of US Treasury notes. Usually the short-term rate is lower than the long-term one, but if you are lending money to the federal government, which is essentially what happens when you buy a Treasury note, you are taking a bigger risk by letting the government have your money for a longer period of time. So you're going to want a higher interest rate to compensate you for taking on that risk. But sometimes this relationship changes. If the two rates start getting closer together, that's called a flattening yield curve. If the long-term rate dips below the short-term rate, that's what we call an inverted yield curve. And the market is concerned about it.
Investors waking up this morning to a recession warning from the bond markets.
The Dow plunging more than 800 points, sparked by a key economic indicator faltering.
A brutal day on Wall Street, stocks plunging as the yield curve inverted, sparking fears that a recession could be on its way.
The yield curve's predictive power has made it a crucial metric for investors and policymakers alike.
The reason why we watch the yield curve so closely is that it has been an incredibly accurate predictor of recessions. Every time that yield curve has inverted, the economy eventually has gone into a recession.
You can see that predictive power on this chart. It shows the difference between the long-term 10-year and short-term 3-month Treasury rates. When that line goes below zero, it represents an inversion, and those inversions have preceded every single US recession going back 50 years. But it wasn't until the 1980s when policymakers started to catch on.
Back in the late 80s, the yield curve was being referred to as a possible leading indicator of the economy. And I was asked by my bosses whether there was anything to this, whether you could prove statistically that there was a relationship.
Arturo Estrella is one of the economists who helped discover the predictive power of the yield curve while working with a colleague at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York.
By early 1989, we were not only seeing the predictive power in general using historical data, but we actually saw an inversion. So at that point, it seemed to be indicating that there would be a recession about a year later. And our presentations were met with a lot of skepticism. But the recession started in 1990, so it was almost a perfect prediction.
Many still doubted the yield curve's predictive power, but Estrella's model then successfully predicted the recession in 2001 before the dot-com bubble burst.
The worst day ever on Wall Street. All the major indices are now down for the year.
And perhaps most notably, after a 2006 yield curve inversion, his model accurately predicted the 2007 downturn that became the Great Recession.
Lehman here is going bankrupt.
Some of the biggest names in American business are tonight gone, along with a lot of money and a lot of jobs.
Estrella's work focused on the difference between the 3-month and 10-year interest rates. But many in the finance world also watch the difference between the 2-year and 10-year rates closely.
The New York Fed research focused on the 3-month, 10-year. They feel that has the most predictive power. I think a lot of the Wall Street guys that you talk to will tell you that they don't start to get excited about it until the 2-year and the 10-year inverts.
Okay, well, there we go. So all of that tells us we're probably already in a recession, wouldn't you say, Michael Weiner?
Yes, I would. But again, with the people, the shell game that goes on right now, people don't want to believe it. And that's why they get so damaged. I think we said in one of the other shows, Brandon, if all these financial whizzes, we watch them every day, and we turn on all these channels to all these geniuses, why in 1929 was there tens of thousands of people in front of Wall Street complaining the day it crashed? Why did 2008 happen the way it happened without giving people forewarning that they could have got from the yield curve and other issues, as well as what was going on in the major wirehouses like Shearson, who didn't admit it? They let the people lose in order for the greater good to save themselves. And that's going to happen now. And I know some people will go, oh, no, I've got this genius, or he or she is going to call me. Where were they in 2008? Where were they? I don't think they were around. They all disappeared. Where were they a few weeks ago when all the phones didn't answer at Fidelity, Vanguard, Ameriprise? All of a sudden, mysteriously, Brandon, if you remember, all these phones went off. Nobody could get in touch with the computer. By the time they could get somebody on the phone, the markets were closed. And all of a sudden, miraculously, these opened back up. So the warnings that we give and the things that we tell people on the show, some people call up and say, well, I've talked to my advisor. I don't really care about hearing what your advisor said. In most cases, I forgot more than they know. I'm too dang old. So I'm done.
Here we go. Grocery rationing. I saw you smile there, Wes. Grocery rationing within 4 years. Again, this is why we started selling freeze-dried food in 2016. 2016. And I just got 2 more pallets for myself. I mean, added to what I've already got. I've got a lot because food's very important, because I got a family and I got young guys in the control room, and I don't know what the future holds, but if I have food, they're likely to show up to work. And maybe they have to do more than show up to work. Maybe they actually have to live in the studio in order to protect the studio from the Venezuelans and the Haitians and the Islamists and the Marxists, all the scum that find out what it is we're doing here and who we are, and we, have to take necessary precautions. So I got a lot of food. I don't know what the average person thinks they're going to do. You're not going to eat your golf cart. You're not going to eat your flat screen TV. And all of these friends, some of them my neighbors, that take 2 or 3 cruises a year. One guy's got to be pushing 350, but he seems to manage to take 2 or 3 cruises a year. I guess it's the all-you-can-eat buffet. But he likes to do that. But, come, rationing time, he's not getting squat from me. Sorry, buddy. Live on the dreams. Feed on the dreams in your mind of all those buffets you went to when you're taking 3 cruises a year for gazillions of years. You're getting nothing. I do not suffer fools very well. Increasingly, we seem to be surrounded by them. But of course, that's one of the judgments of God. You become a nation of fools, vain, useless, and futile. And, the longer I live, the more that I read, and the more knowledge that I gain, the more I have zero patience for these kind of people, because they don't have a lack of ability to obtain what this audience has, what I have, what you two have, what the audience has. My audience are smart people. They read, they research, they listen, they grab data, they know what's happening. And I don't have any patience for all the fools out there because they don't want to do that. I have even some friends of mine that will call up and say, what do you think about this? I'm like, well, I just did a whole show on it tonight, but you didn't bother to listen. And I'm not giving you a private radio show or TV show, okay? Wait for Logan to put it online and you can watch. But that's what's going to happen. You're going to have a lot of people saying, well, how did this happen? I mean, my wife even went and visited with someone today to get her hair done. And she came back and she was talking about their conversation. And she said, I'm really thankful for you, Brandon. I'm like, wait, excuse me, what'd you say? I wanted to hear that again. So I'm really thankful for... What was that, Wes?
What's the day and time? Write that down.
Yeah, write it down. Say it again. I'm really thankful for you. And, because you understand what's happening and you have prepared, and there's stability in our home and there's stability in our life. And she said, when it hits the fan, a lot of these people are going to be coming to you wanting help. And I said, no, there's going to be a sign on the front door, and they are not going to like what it says. They're not.
It's interesting, again, stating the fact and being I'm as old as Methuselah, as you say, Brandon. All of these disasters that keep happening, and everybody doesn't get it. And again, because they try to wait they don't want to have the bad news. They don't want to prepare. They want to wait till they have a problem. And then they call us and they pay twice as much and get twice as little.
That's right.
And something else I want to mention on the show today, this SAVE Act that they're talking about right now, if the founders of this nation legitimately did not want Americans only to vote on the elections, then the British could have voted in 1800 and we'd also be under England, because they were illegal aliens, but they could have voted in 1800 because they were here. So, what the heck? This type of stuff, when they say gold, and I hear from people, Wes and I constantly, why should I buy gold? Well, my advisor thinks it's very speculative. Really? Well, if gold was really speculative, why was the financial foundation of this nation under it for 200 years without issue? Why didn't they put it under stock certificates? Why didn't they give it to J.P. Morgan and gamble in the streets? They didn't. So, ask them that. I really would like to know, why don't central banks buy U.S. stocks? Why do central banks buy gold? So please don't call me and tell me anymore that your advisor told you that gold is speculative. Seriously, that ain't working anymore. I'm done.
That's all. I'm done. I'm out. That's all. Wes, here you go. Grocery rationing within 4 years. You sent me the article, so I do read Jeffrey Tucker, so I would have found it eventually, because I go to this website a couple times a week. But thank you for sending it over and bringing it to my attention tonight. Why did you do that?
Well, it touches on Kamala Harris's price control proposal.
Yeah.
And they're talking about, if they go to that, it's going to be rationing what you can and can't get at the grocery store. It also talks about if Harris policies are implemented, they could result in long-term government control over basic commodities, reducing market freedom and consumer choice. And again, I mentioned on one of our shows before, if the government gets involved in price controls on goods and services, you want to talk about the endless corruption that will go on, because they'll be picking who gets those contracts and who does not get the contracts to fill the orders at those stores. And there will be a lot of, it'll be like foreign aid. Foreign aid is a new term for money laundering.
Yeah, there you go. Look at this headline. Gold is giving you a once-in-a-generation buying opportunity on its way to $4,400. Yeah.
It's on the move.
I think, Michael, you've predicted what it will be by this year, end of the year?
And I predicted last year's 2,100 in December, 2,400 in April, and I'm saying 2,800 to 3,000 year end. Unless Kamala wins, then all bets are off. All right, get your free packet, no obligation free packet. Just text Wes 602-558-8585, 602-558-8585. Again, just text him and he'll send you that free no obligation packet. How to put gold into your IRA, the difference between numismatic, 1933 and older, that provides privacy, and then bullion, just a 1 ounce gold eagle minted in the last few years, or silver eagle. 602-558-8585. Tonight, we're going to talk about some very explosive news. Hezbollah. A lot of those guys will not be having children. Some of them, I guess, apparently had their below the belt blown off today, and I am not crying for the baby killers, Hezbollah. We'll have that explosive information tonight, 7:30 Central, Brandon House Live. Till then, thanks for watching. Take care. Tonight on the Worldview Report, we have lots of information to report on the alleged would-be assassin of former President Donald Trump. Trump appears to be the most wanted man on somebody's hit list. Could it be the federal government's three-letter agencies? We'll connect some dots. We've also got body cam footage of the arrest of the failed assassin Ryan Roth. The unelected globalists at the United Nations are meeting in New York City next week, and one of the things on their agenda is to pressure the governments of the world to introduce vaccine passports and digital IDs for their citizens. And it looks like the 2024 presidential election could be a replay of 2020, when it took days and even weeks for some states to finish counting ballots. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. In our top story tonight, there's a lot more information that's come out in the last 24 hours about the would-be assassin of Donald J. Trump. His name is Ryan Wesley Ruth. Some say Ralph. We don't really know, but in the end, do we really care? What we do know is he's 58 years old and has an extensive criminal history in North Carolina. He has been arrested and accused of attempting to assassinate the former president. This is the second time in 9 weeks that someone has tried to end Trump's life. Here's a clip from police body cam footage of the would-be assassin being caught and placed under arrest about 40 minutes after he was chased from his sniper's nest at Trump's international golf course in Florida.
Driver, take 2 steps to your right. Take 2 steps to your right. Driver, walk straight back. Keep walking. Keep that low.
Some observed that Routh was smiling as he was taken into custody during that roadside arrest, and he was also smiling after being placed in the police squad car. Now, does that look like a man who is, well, in any way worried about where he might spend the rest of his life? Apparently, he's not unfamiliar with handcuffs and police booking rooms. According to Vigilant News Network, Ryan Roth amassed 74 arrests and more than 100 charges in Guilford County, North Carolina, between the years of 1996 and 2014. His offenses include serious felonies like manufacturing weapons of mass destruction and possessing stolen property. Despite living most of his life in North Carolina, Routh moved to Hawaii 6 years ago, returning briefly in May to clear out his former residence. A former neighbor described Routh as wild and confrontational, but did express surprise at his arrest in West Palm Beach for the alleged assassination attempt. Routh penned a 200-plus page manifesto in which he expressed his hatred for Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and other public officials. His manifesto was titled Unnecessary War. In one chapter, which was titled Why Not Nuclear War, he advocates a nuclear holocaust, writing, quote, "The entire world runs and hides in fear because Putin has nuclear weapons," end quote. And then he insists, quote, "We must strike first. It must be a quick and decisive and powerful blow to end it once and for all," end quote. In his so-called book, Routh also encouraged Iran to assassinate Donald Trump. And as investigators delve deeper into his background, well, they also find that he had a brief stint at North Carolina A&T University, and thus questions arise about the path that led him from, well, a troubled past to this high-profile arrest. Routh is also known to have been a staunch supporter of Ukraine and was even involved in recruiting mercenary soldiers for Ukraine's war with Russia. He even appeared in a propaganda video put out by Ukraine's Nazi Azov battalion, promoting the NATO-backed pro-Ukrainian war effort, and this is all according to a report by journalist Jack Posobiec. Watch this.